hand that feeds you can also starve you. This ancient African proverb reveals the dangerous game African nations have played for decades. April 16, 2025, midnight approaches in Ouagadougou. Armed men move towards the presidential palace. Another coup d'etat in motion. Foreign powers watch, expecting Captain Ibrahim Traore to fall like many other African leaders. But by sunrise, everything has changed. What these plotters didn't know is that they weren't just attacking the man. They were igniting a revolution that will shake the foundations of global military power. In the next few minutes, I will reveal how a failed assassination attempt transformed a gold-rich but weapons-poor nation into the architect of Africa's most stunning military revolution, and why Western powers are terrified of what's coming next. Now imagine that your village is under attack. Your soldiers have the courage to fight, but then their weapons are empty. The guns have no ammunition. So your village have to call neighboring villages to borrow weapons. But by the time help arrives, the terrorists have already done their worst and gone. The village is in ashes. Now all what we've just said is not imagination. It was Burkina Faso's reality. The deadly paradox, a nation swimming in gold, yet begging for bullets. Before Traore took power, when terrorists attacked, Burkinabe soldiers would wait weeks for Western-approved weapons. A commander revealed, sometimes we borrowed rifles from Niger while people were being unalived, waiting for us. France didn't just block the sales of weapons from France, which was actually their partner. But France went ahead to block the sales of weapons from other countries to Burkina Faso. You can imagine that you are fighting with terrorists. You are fighting with people who want to take away your sovereignty. And you are asking weapons from your most trusted ally, which in that case was France. So they thought. And France refused to sell you weapons. Sometimes they say they'll sell non-lethal weapons to you. Something like maybe shoes, boots, uniform. They can sell you uniform, sell you cap, sell you the boots, the army boots and all those things. But they don't want to sell you lethal weapons. Meanwhile, they know very well that the terrorists have lethal weapons. You can imagine that. And this was not just Burkina Faso's problem. From Mozambique to Nigeria, African nations fighting insurgencies face the same cynical calculation. Beg for protection and surrender control, or remain vulnerable and keep your dignity. April 16, 2025, Security Minister Mahamadou Sana would later reveal the full plot. Military officers led by Commander Joanna Compaoré planned to storm the palace while terrorists launched coordinated attacks across the country. But something went catastrophically wrong for the plotters. Burkina Faso's intelligence services intercepted messages between the conspirators and terrorist leaders. But the bombshell discovery, the operation was being directed from Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, with evidence suggesting involvement of Traore's predecessor Damiba, the very man Traore had overthrown in 2022. And behind them, shadows of Western interests desperate to regain control of a nation slipping from their grasp. Now, wait a minute. In most African countries, this story ends predictably. The government falls, Western-friendly regime gets installed, and mineral exploitation continues. But Traore didn't just survive. He turned this attack into the spark that would ignite Africa's military revolution. 3 days after the failed coup, Traore stood before thousands in Bobo Dioulasso and uttered the words now emblazoned across military academies throughout West Africa. A nation that forges its own steel will never kneel for bullets. He didn't just arrest the coup plotters, he accelerated the most ambitious military transformation in modern African history. In April 2024, Traore had broken ground on Burkina Faso's first armed forces industrial complex, starting with the Tex Forces factory for military uniforms. But post-coup, this vision exploded. Now, most African leaders just set time bombs in their countries, sitting without any action. Now, this coup that came gave Traore a plan. He accelerated the acquisition of a military industrial complex in Burkina Faso. And this is exactly what Africa needs. The coup has helped Traore to see what it's actually lacking. Many other African countries always just sit and wait for these things to happen before they start up a new cycle of ordering weapons from Europe and other places. But when you are in need of weapons that you can't manufacture or you don't manufacture, agreements become politicized. You get to play to the terms of your opponent. At times we see that when you have a problem, it is sometimes an advantage for you to look at the loopholes that you have and make amends for it. That's why in the business world, if you haven't failed in business, you can't really give an advice to somebody who is just starting up. You must be someone who have tried and failed, tried and failed, tried and failed. And so we know that failures are not really that bad, but they serve as this template to help you rebuild. When the coup occurred, Traore came out with a plan, and in a minute I'm going to give you exactly what that plan looks like. Traore did something very powerful. He redirected 30% of gold revenue towards acquiring a capability that so few militaries would boast of in Africa. Now, ECOWAS had bullied Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, not knowing that these countries have a plan on their own, not knowing that these countries were going through something very difficult. Before Ibrahim Traore and the Assimi Goitas took power in the Sahel region, the Sahel countries were actually suffering from insurgencies, and they had their big brother, the ECOWAS. ECOWAS was there. ECOWAS never bothered to help these countries pull them out of this crisis, but immediately the Ibrahim Traore's came to light to take control of their country. That's when ECOWAS threatened them with war. And who was behind ECOWAS? We all saw the romance, the bromance that happened between the French president and the Nigerian president, who at the time was the chair of ECOWAS, and actually he's still the chair of ECOWAS as we speak. Now, there is one thing that analysts observed. During that period, Henri Damiba, who was the leader of Burkina Faso, gave excuses like they didn't have enough arms. Can you imagine that France, which was beside Burkina Faso then, we're talking about good relationship because France was not yet expelled, because France got expelled when Ibrahim Traore came to power. They were extracting uranium, and each time Damiba asked weapons from France, what did France say?
We can't sell lethal weapons to you.
And Ibrahim Traore said, in his capacity as the captain at that period, he had a lot of information. He said, often when terrorists attack a particular village or a town, Burkina Faso will take weeks and even sometimes a month to do a counterattack because they didn't have enough weapons. They would go to neighboring countries to borrow weapons to go and attack, simply because their trusted partner, France, which was extracting raw materials at that time and which was heavily present diplomatically in the country, saw that the Burkinabés didn't need lethal weapons. How can you be fighting terrorism without lethal weapons, and your terrorists that attacked your country has lethal weapons? It was written on the wall. And after the coup that happened in April 2025, Ibrahim Traore saw a golden opportunity. He decided that 30% of all revenues that come from gold mining should be allocated to self-sufficiency in military hardware. That is, what he actually means is that he wants Burkina Faso to start producing all its guns, its ammunition, and other weapons. And this historic decision of Ibrahim Traore of military self-sufficiency wasn't just about building guns. It was about dismantling centuries of colonial dependency with just one masterstroke. Now, most leaders use assassination attempts to carry out crackdown, but Ibrahim Traore is using his assassination attempt to transform a continent. And why do I say to transform a continent? I say to transform a continent because most African countries don't have a military-industrial complex of their own. And most often, they fall into this situation where they start fighting with terrorists and don't have weapons to carry out counterattacks. And that is why you find small armed groups just disturbing sovereign African countries. Look at Congo. A very big country like Congo, a mineral-rich country like Congo, because it lacks its military-industrial complex, it is finding difficulties to fight rebels. Look at Burkina Faso, look at Niger, look at Mali. These are all sovereign countries. But then, it happens that the terrorists they're fighting against have more weapons than them. Ibrahim Traore's strategy has two devastating components. The first part is innovation for Africa's reality. The new drone factory in Ouagadougou now deploys surveillance UVAs within hours of attack, custom built for Sahel conditions, not European battlefields. As one engineer puts it, for once, we are building weapons for our wars, not borrowing designs from someone else. Second, economic leverage that shattered the old model. Traore's ultimatum to mining companies sends shockwaves through boardrooms worldwide. Buy 30% of your equipment from Burkinabe factories or lose your license. The goal that once funded foreign militaries now builds African defense infrastructure. The numbers are staggering. About 6,000 new defense industry jobs. Youth unemployment in manufacturing zone cut by 2/3. And most importantly, response time to terrorist attacks slashed from 72 hours to only 18 hours. That's a game changer. That is going to scare the hell out of terrorists. They're going to be afraid to attack because, of course, there is going to be a reaction. At first, there was no reaction. They will just come and wipe out the village and there will be no reaction from the government, or maybe the government will react after a month. After things have died out, they would have already gone to 4 other villages or 5 other villages. So things are actually changing and moving to the permanent site, as some pastors will say that the church is moving to the permanent site. Burkina Faso is moving to the permanent site. The reaction is predictable. Western analysts warn of destabilization, while diplomats scramble to contain what one French official called a dangerous precedent of military sovereignty. Imagine a dangerous precedent of military sovereignty. This French military guy is actually afraid that other African countries would follow the same example, and they call it dangerous precedent of military sovereignty. So Burkina Faso should not have military sovereignty? Now in the US, back in the US and Congress, this military general says that Burkina Faso is now a threat. The fact that Burkina Faso start producing weapons for themselves, Burkina Faso is now a threat. Other militaries should not defend their territory. They should allow terrorists to chop off chunks of their territory. You can't just go and say that that country is now becoming a threat. Don't bring democracy in Burkina Faso. The Burkina Faso is fine. Please, don't bring democracy. And Traore was very fast to give a response to all this. He said, "They fear not our guns, but our forge. They are not concerned with what we build, but that we build at all. The real threat isn't African weapons. It's African independence. The continent that spends $20 billion yearly on foreign arms could build 40 Burkina Faso-style defense hubs with that same investment." Burkina Faso has had new allies who don't restrict the kind of weapons they sell to Burkina Faso. To the ordinary Burkinabes, the impact is so profound. Village elders' testimony captures it perfectly. For the first time, when terrorists came, our soldiers arrived with enough guns, enough vehicles. They didn't need permission from France or Washington to save our children. Meanwhile, a generation of African engineers who once faced the brutal choice between unemployment and migration now design defense systems that protect their own economies, that protect their own communities. This is the untold revolution, the dignity restored alongside security. The question facing every African nation now is stark. Continue the cycle of dependency that has defined the post-colonial era, or follow Burkina Faso's blueprint for true sovereignty? A coup designed to reinstate foreign control instead catalyzed the most significant military transformation in modern African history. At 37, Captain Ibrahim Traore created a model that challenges centuries of exploitation. Whether he succeeds long-term remains uncertain, but the path he has forged is already reshaping how African nations confront both terrorism and foreign domination. As a new African saying goes, when you build your own weapons, you choose your own battles. And let me tell you, it's not just about Burkina Faso. No. It's not Burkina Faso's story, right? It's a story about the whole of Africa. It's potentially the beginning of Africa's true independence. Because what? You think these countries were independent when some other country come and take their natural resources and buy them for 0.008 euros? Meanwhile, that same product is sold at 200 euros per kilo. Do you think that's independence? This is the true independence that is coming. And that's why these foreign countries are saying that Burkina Faso is now a threat. True independence is ahead. This is Asangwa Luis for the Strategic Lens, seeing beyond the headlines to unfold how power truly works in our real world.